very happy to have Professor Pavel Chakraborty from University to talk about his research today. The paper is on intellectual property regimes. The interesting point is now today I can claim that I know all the three co-authors quite well. So fairly excited about it, and I'm not, at his request, I'm not going to do too much of introduction.
Yes.
So over to you.
Good afternoon all. Thanks to first Vishwanath to invite me over at IMB. It's a really nice day to be here. I'm become completely drenched while coming, but it's good to be in IMA. So this is a joint work at Vishwanath says Saurabh Bhattacharya, who is in Royal Holloway, University of London, and Chirantan Chatterjee, Indian School of Business. So what do we talk about? So if you see recent theories in firm organization or how a firm is organized, most of the recent theories talk about how globalization or some form of globalization, let's say product market competition or import competition or input trade liberalization, have changed the way a firm is organized. Like how exposure to international trade changes firms' internal organizational design. Okay, so and on the other hand, there are the series of papers by Nicholas Bloom in Stanford and John Van Reenen was in LSE, now in MIT, to understand that firm organization plays a very key determinant in understanding how a firm mixes its inputs, how a firm performance, how a firm's productivity is. So firm organization is a very key important distinction in understanding how firms vary, how there is heterogeneity across firms. And what we do, we try to focus on one such mechanism, which is the complementarity effect of change in patent regime and technology adoption, to understand how labor market adjustments takes place within a firm, or production technology change takes place within a firm, or how firm organization changes as a result of the complementarity effect of intellectual property regimes and technology adoption. Just to give you a bit of motivation, why do we want to see this? So what happened, so what we do, this is for Indian manufacturing firms across all manufacturing sectors, and the data is from 1990 to 2006, and you see a red vertical line in 2002. In 2002, what happened? India became, I'll give again a substantial amount of time to understand what happened in 2002, but what happened briefly in 2002 is that India undertook a domestic patent reform to went from a process patent regime to a product patent regime, and there are several other characteristics India happened. So there is a significant change that happened in 2002, and what we do is see the technology adoption of the firms, which is the sum of the R&D expenditure, ICT investments, import of capital goods, technology transfer, differs after 2002. Everything is growing till 2002 for the low-tech firms and the high-tech firms. And how do I define low-techs and high-techs? Obviously, these are the firms which have technology adoption. Height for the high-techs is above the median of the industry for the firm belongs, and low-techs is below the median technology adoption of the industry that the firm belongs. And if you see this absolutely differs after 2002. The rate of increase of the technology adoption for the high-tech firms increases significantly, whereas for the low-tech firms, it started to decrease. So there has been certain amount of change after 2002 that we see. And if we see the managerial compensation of the firms, the same firms, and if you see both increasing after 2002, but the rate of increase of high-tech firms is much more than the rate of increase for the low-tech firms. So these compelled us to understand that, or to seek or to investigate that, is there any causation or any kind of association between this technology adoption, managerial compensation in conjunction with the time 2002 or not?
So,
yes.
Just a quick question, looking at the trends.
Yes.
Is there a reason to suspect that something similar happened around 1996, 97?
Yes, 94 happened. Because the WTO, India signed the WTO agreement and the tariffs dropped significantly. So there is an effect of the trade that happened, I guess. Because because of the tariffs that dropped in, India was importing a lot of goods. And when importing a lot of goods, you need different kinds of people that have the managers. So I guess that happened for both low-techs and the high-techs. There's a sharp rise in 1994, 1995 that happened in both the cases. But it dropped again. And
so
it started.
The way to interpret that probably, and again, let me know if it is
sure.
is that at least in pharma, I know most firms were sitting on their products in around 1993 to see which way the 1994 talks would happen, and then there is a release of products into the country.
Yes.
Right. So somewhere around 94 there was a drop, and then immediately after that it started picking up, and it kind of exploded after 2002-ish.
So what we show is we actually run a robustness check using only pharma, the same, and see a counter placebo as a placebo effect. That the entire effect is actually not driven by the pharma, because you anyway try to that patent filings, pharma is driving the results, and that's not the case. It's the other industries that is driving the results. So you run a placebo with pharma.
So the other one is, I'm assuming most of the software firms will come under high tech.
But these are software, we are manufacturing completely. Manufacturing. Okay. So these two things gave us the motivation to see if there is some kind of effect going on. Now let's just spend a little bit of time in understanding how this literature came about. So the first paper that came about in organizational economics, or in other words, some people say personal economics, is a paper by Garicano in 2000. So the Garicano poses a simple question: what does a firm do? So firm solve problems. That's the main functioning of a firm. And a firm is a knowledge-based hierarchy where managers provide knowledge to a firm, because production requires knowledge. Okay, and managers solve less common problems, whereas the production workers solve common problems in a firm. And this solving of the problems changes when a firm invests more in technological adoption or some kind of exposure to the external market. So that when firm has an exposure to the international market, a new set of problems that comes to the firm. And to solve this new set of problems, the firms basically hire managers to solve this kind of problems. So that's the basic idea. And this picked up by Nicholas Bloom and John Van Reenen in a series of papers to say that management or managerial practices have a significant determinant of firm performance. And I'll just give you two papers very briefly. This is the first one. In 2007, they designed an innovative survey tool to collect management practice data from 732 medium-sized firms from OECD countries to show that managerial practices are significantly associated with firm-level productivity and profitability. And in 2013, the series of co-authors, they ran an experiment in Mumbai on Indian textile firms. So what they did was they hired a management consultancy firm for 3 years. And they took a set of control firms and set of treated firms. And they gave management consultancy to a set of 28 firms. And after 3 years, they compared the firms which had management consultancy and which had not, and show that adopting these managerial practices actually raised productivity of the firms who had these managerial practices by 17% through improved quality and efficiency. So the management for firm management is an important criteria to understand how a firm differs in their performance. Okay. Next, so this organizational change now has been picked up in different streams. The first to pick up, or not the first, one of the two is the globalization and organizational change. The first paper to carry this is Rossi Hansberg and Lorenzo Caliendo in 2012. They took it in the international trade perspective. They show that when firms participate in the export market, they encounter a new set of problems to sell their products in the export markets. Let's say they go to a export fair, and to invest in this distribution channels, they need different kinds of specialized people who understands to how to invest in these distribution channels to set up a production network or to set up a marketing network. So for this, exposure to the export markets arise a new set of, again, not so common problems, and this raises the demand for managers. So this was the first actually to link trade and organizational change. The same, and what they argue is that, the other thing they argue is that, and this exposure to the international market actually expands the firm vertically. So hierarchy is being added. So when let's say production worker does not solve a problem, they go to their senior level manager to ask the problem, how could you solve the problem? And hierarchy is being created because of that, and firm expands vertically. And there's another paper by Chen, who is actually a student of Rossi Hansberg, and Chen showed that in a when firm faces import competition in a monopolistic competitive setup, firms actually flattens over time. The span of control increases. The hierarchy is being dropped, so the number of positions between the CEO or the entrepreneur and the firm level managers drops down. So you have two different kinds of scenario that international trade actually could also flatten a firm, could also expand a firm vertically. It depends how do you set it up. Empirically, there are only 4 papers right now. So all the 3 papers except this one is on the US data set. And most of them talk about that how import competition or product market competition actually raises, again, executive wages. And these wages increase through an incentive-based contract, because when you solve problems and firms give these manager incentives. So this entire increase in the compensation of the executives or the executive managers increases through increase in their incentives and not much in the wages. And it's me and my co-author Ohad Rave, we took it at the Indian firm level database and see input rate liberalization to have the same kind of effect that in case of India as well. Drop in input tariffs, not output tariffs, which is product market competition. Drop in input tariffs significantly raises the manager's compensation through, again, incentive-based contract and not the wages. Okay, so these are the kind of trade and organizational change papers. The next is so there are some papers where people talk about ICT adoption and technological changes, which actually Garicano in 2000 paper highlights that when firm invests in technology, there would be organizational changes. The demand for workers would change, or some workers would be more demanded than other workers. The relative wage ratio within a firm would change, or there would be a within firm wage inequality that happens. But as of now, most of the papers, as highlighted in the handbook of organizational economics, is that the essential difficulty facing a large sample empirical research has been the ability to distinguish between association and causation. So all these papers, they actually also say very directly that we find very robust correlations between technological adoption and organizational change. It's not the causation that technological adoption is actually changing organizational changes. And in some cases, a failure even to think carefully about this distinction. So we come here to find out a quasi-natural experiment to find out that actually how the complementarity effect of patent change, technological adoption changes the organizational design within a firm. And in case of the intellectual property and its consequences, so there has been a lot of study on IPR, like lot of studies. I couldn't even put. But most of the IPR studies is related to the innovation, incentives to innovation. That incentives to innovation has increased how are firms doing in terms of innovation expenditure or filing of patents. And changes in intellectual property rights and impact of within firm changes remain under examined. So there are very, very few papers, or there are like couple of papers who have looked at within and between firm wage inequality, firm management, organizational design because of a change in the patent regime. And we try to contribute to that. So what's our contribution? So the main is whether how changes in intellectual property regimes lead firms to restructure their management or organization. Basically what we do, we aim to see how the share of managerial compensation or the relative demand of managers or executives, how do you call it, responds to the changes in innovation policy or incentives to innovation. And with this, we do 4 important contributions. We basically, to the best of our knowledge, this is the first paper to look specifically the effect of changes in intellectual property regimes on firm management or organization. And what we do, we focus both on within and between firm inequality to see how within firm wage inequality and across firms wage inequality changes because of this intellectual property regimes change. And we go beyond usual correlations to find an experiment to understand what is the causation between technology adoption in complementarity with intellectual property regimes and firm management. And this is also, so managers are also skilled people. So we contribute a bit in the literature on the skill premium in developing countries, but these are not the entire skill premium you're talking about. These are certain kind of skilled people in the entire skill set in that we are talking about, but yes, this is also a contribution to the skill premium in the developing countries literature. Yes?
Pavel, I'm sure you're going to talk about it a little later. When you're defining firm management, how are you defining it? Because I know that IPR is exogenous change, and firm management would be the endogenous change that you're looking at.
So firm management, we are talking about the compensation. Compensation. And we not only compensation, we are talking about extensive, intensive, both. So we'll show the number of managers changes, we'll show the average compensation changes, we'll show ratio changes, we'll show absolute level changes.
Okay, so the composition changing will be what we call as organizational change.
Now, what we have called organizational change is, so we are looking at both two sides of the firm, like if the complementarity effect, the IPR change effect is helping a firm flattening over time or vertically increasing over time. So that's the design you are talking about. So we have, once I go to the data set, you will understand why I'm, and we do this using this novel data set on Indian firms, which reports very detailed data on managerial compensation by different management layers. And across all the manufacturing firms, it spans over 15 years of time. We'll then have a time kind of a control treated group, and we use this patent regime change from process to product of 2002 as a quasi-natural experiment. And we focus on two main questions, that how does intellectual property regimes affect firm management, and if it does so, how does it change organizational design? Because when you accommodate managers within a firm, the firms has to change, the design of a firm has to change. How does it change the design of the firm? Yes. Sure.
There is difference between IPR regime and the perception of IPR regime. Right, so while in 2002 we've adopted a stronger and stringent IPR regime, in 2011-12, thanks to various cases in pharma industry, that has taken a little bit of a beating in terms of how much we protect IPR, and I'm sure that has happened across various countries as well through, call it compulsory licensing or, so what I'm concerned here would be that in the results that we're going to put in eventually, unless you look for so people react based on the perception, not on the actual, not on the rule of the paper, on the paper, right? So you may find out some bias, right? Especially if the perception is systematically different from the actual ground reality.
Yes. So yes, absolutely. So in that case, so I'll show you in the robustness checks. What we do is we do an ex ante ex post approach. So we see if what you are saying, if the regulation was being anticipated before, so we do not see any effect before 2002 that is happening, and we just see accumulated effect that happens after 2002. Well, I'll show you this in the robustness check. Absolutely. So findings very briefly, what we see very significant rise in the share of managerial compensation due to change in intellectual property regime, especially for the high-tech firms which are a priori high-tech because of the significant investments in innovation after the reform, and it leads to differences in hierarchies or the organizational change and design changes over a firm. So the data set, what we use, so this is called the prowess data set, which is maintained by Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy. it's a panel information from income statements and balance sheets of the firms for all the listed companies in the Indian Stock Exchange. It gives around for 70% of economic activity in the registered industrial sector, 75% of corporate taxes, and 95% of excise duty, which is pretty representative of understanding an registered industrial sector. And do not need actually unregistered industrial sector in this case, because the firm management or the design of a firm is not clearly defined in case of firms which are in the unregistered industrial sector. This is advantages. Basically, it's a firm panel of firms, so you can actually track the firms over time to know how firm management or design changes. It gives detailed product level information at the firm level to understand what the products produced by the firm, and it suits our period of concern. So the main part is here. So prowess gives very detailed compensation information and employee compensation divided into managers and non-managers. And again, the managers are divided into top management, which are the executive directors, which is the CEO, CMD, managing director, chairman of a firm, who have executive powers within a firm. And the other one is the middle management, which are the directors or the head of the divisions within a firm. So these are, and it also gives the names of the managers by different management levels. So what we have is, we have 3 different layers of within a firm, and we know how these layers are changing over time. So this top management, middle management, and the non-managerial. Yes, we are not doing very great. You can also see that many firms would have several managerial layers within a firm, and they may not be compared across firms because the classifications of the managers by different managers by firms. But when the firms, because these are all listed firms, and the stock exchange has some norms, so when the firms reports their information, they kind of aggregate these managers to one level which is similar across in the management positions. So yes, we are not doing great, absolutely, but the most of the layers that has been shown within a firm is a French level data set by Caliendo again. These are 4 layers, so we are not doing great, but not very bad either. And we use this relative managerial compensation by total compensation as the outcome of interest, as we call is the relative demand for managers or the executives. We do a simple cross validation of the data set. What we do is randomly select 20 firms and go to their annual report and go to the prowess data set and to see if this matches, if there has been any problem in reporting the managerial compensation or directors remuneration or number of executives, and we do not see that the correlation coefficient is almost 1. So if there is no problem that an understanding that the firms are reporting different kinds of managerial compensation in the prowess rather than what is reported in the annual report.
So this data set is complete from 1990?
It starts from 1990. Yes, so these changes over time. So so the more the recent it is. So what prowess does, it keeps on adding firms to the prowess. So the more recent database you have, the number of firms increases, the number of information in the firms or in their balance sheet increases.
I thought prowess's main source of information itself is annual reports.
It's annual reports. Yes. Yes, so people might have argued that managerial compensation, because there could be some, they do not want to disclose information, but they come actually from annual reports. Annual reports. So we just do not want to, because nobody's used this, so people may doubt it. So we just do the simple cross validation to say that we are good, we are doing good. There is no under-reporting or over-reporting of the managerial compensation. There's little bit of stylized facts. We just plot simple share of executive managers over time, and you see there is change exactly after 2002 that happens both for the low tech. The increase for the high techs is significantly higher than the low tech, and that happens right around 2002. And it also gives us an idea that something is happening around 2002. We do a simple managerial compensation ratio by industry level to understand is there is kind of heterogeneity is there. And you can see it varies from 1.5 to 9%. And when you take it down to the firm level, it will be much more heterogeneous. So it's the managerial compensation divided by total compensation of total labor. So now let's understand why we are saying this patent regime change as a quasi-natural experiment, and how the patent policy in India was. So the patent policy in India has a long history which dates back to 1856, but actual attention people started putting right after India gained independence. There are two committees that is being set up in 1948 and 50 and 1959 and 60 to study the patent rights and provide suggestions on the type of patent system India should adopt. And India, there are two recommendations from the committees, that the Indian patent system actually failed to stimulate and encourage the development and exploitation of new inventions in the industries, and the foreign patentees actually hold a larger share of patents in the Indian market. And based on these recommendations, India actually adopted the Indian Patent Act of 1970 was implemented, which is basically focused at resources at lower prices, which could be potentially beneficial for India. So the basic highlights of the Patent Act was process patents would be granted and not product patents. The term of patents was 14 years, 5 and 7 in case of chemicals and drugs, compulsory licensing and license of right. Several areas were excluded from patents, and government could use patent invention to prevent scarcity. And the Act also found support from the domestic firms and various political parties in India. Now let's jump back to 1991. So India had this BOP crisis. India went to IMF to have this stabilization package, and IMF came up with this number of conditions to give the stabilization package. One has to be, India has to be a member of the WTO. So in 1994, India signed the Marrakesh Agreement 8 years after the Uruguay round and agreed to be bound by TRIPS. So, and this enabled India to have around 10-year transition period to shift from the existing IPR regime to stronger product patent regime, which is TRIPS compliant IPR regime. Now, this India's initial transition since 1994 started basically the failed Patents Amendment or Ordinance in 1994 that was brought about by the coalition government amending the Patents Act of 1970. This only allowed for a mailbox provision which only included product patent applications to be filed but to be examined later after 2004. And the ordinance lapsed in 1994 with the Patents Bill 1994 because India's parliament was dissolved for national elections and the ordinance bill was lapsed. So there was a concern about, because India was not complying with the TRIPS, India implemented Amendment Act 1999, Patents Amendment Act, which was actually the first of the three regulations between 1995 and 2007 to a transition to a stronger IPR regime. But this ordinance was basically came into force retrospectively as a result of the failed Patent Amendments Bill 1995, and it also had product patents filed in areas of drug, pharmaceuticals and agrochemicals. Those such patents were not allowed and the applications are only reviewed after again 2004, 31st December 2004. So the implementation of the Patents Act did not actually encourage much of innovative and related activities because it was basically a post factum of the failed Act of 95 bill. So again, a second legislation suit followed which will actually use it, which is the Patents Amendment Act 2002. And if you see there's a quote from the Comptroller General of Patents, Design and Direct Months, that the Patents Amendment Act 2002 actually replaced the earlier patent rules implemented by this 1970 Act, and this Act came into force on 20th May. So this second legislation which actually broadened the scope for the implementation of the TRIPS compliant IPR regime, had this 4 or 5 major that they implemented product patents in all fields of technology. It increased the term to 20 years, it deleted the license of rights provision, limited scope for license, compulsory licensing, and the governments to use patented inventions and recognize parallel imports for patented products. Let's come to the empirical strategy. So what we do here, so we have a simple OLS fixed types estimation to understand how this product change into the intellectual property regimes in conjunction with technology adoption affects managerial compensation of the firm. So this is managerial compensation divided by total compensation of firm I at time t. This is the number of fixed effects. So this is IPR02, which is an indicator in the intellectual property regimes. It's a year dummy which takes a dummy variable which takes a value 1 as if the year is greater than 2002. And what is high tech? So it's a technology adoption dummy. It takes a value 1 if the average innovation expenditure of a firm is greater than the median innovation expenditure to the which industry belongs before 2002. So it is the average innovation between 1990 to 2001 of every firm, and if that average is greater than the median of the industry, that is a high tech firm. So the idea is a firm which is a priori high tech, yes.
So innovation expenditure is how stable is that? Because contracts
That's why you take an average over time, because it goes up and down. And we also check with the initial innovation expenditure at 1990, so that there would be no endogeneity and the results are the same.
Since you're looking at the median, for sure half the firms are going to be high tech and half the firms are going to be low tech by definition.
Yes, by definition.
But if the so imagine I'm making buckets, and the entire bucket making industry has moved from manual bucket making to robot bucket making. That means the entire industry has moved to, general parlance high tech. But nonetheless, your data set is going to capture half of them being high tech and half of them being low tech.
Yes.
Did I get that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what is innovation expenditure? The sum of, again, R&D expenditure, technology transfer, and input of capital goods. So we have this bunch of industry firm characteristics, the T-1 period, and we have this firm in the fixed effects, year fixed effects, and we interact industry fixed effects at the 5-digit level with year trends to counter for all simultaneity effects. We cluster standard errors at the firm level. So what is beta 1? Our main. Yes, sure.
With the empirical strategy, you're not. So I see that you're looking for industry firm characteristics, but you're not controlling for any macroeconomic variables like business cycle effects.
We will do.
You will do that. Okay.
Definitely. Business. So year fixed effects will take up the business cycle, no?
Not always, right? I mean, the business cycle is prolonging for a few years.
Okay. So
It
any
may not-
example? Any example? That we have in
So
mind?
you have crises, the financial crisis that started in 2006 or 2007, and that
So we end at 2006.
No, I understand. I'm just giving you
Yeah,
an
example.
example.
Okay.
All the way till 2010, before the world sees the signs of even remote recovery. In that particular case, the year fixed effects may not be able to capture that.
True.
There's an interdependence among the fixed effects of the years, right? So
That's right.
So that's why I'm concerned in the sense that imagine.
In that sense, we do not, but we test for every other competing channels. So let's say exports growth in US, all these channels we test.
So you have 1 year in your data set which is slightly turbulent in the sense of Y2K.
Yes.
Which also is a technological challenge in some sense. And so I'm concerned that you're not.
But these will be much for the software firms. These are manufacturing.
No, fair enough. But you're also looking at.
And these are mostly managers, and these are actually not the administrative managers. These are not HR or the administrative position. These are could be marketing or other kind of managers, which actually deal with the production direction.
So, but if you had a crisis, a particular financial crisis in a particular year, wouldn't it also affect the way managers' compensations are made?
Yes, absolutely.
And the year fixed.
Absolutely.
And if there is a prolonged impact, so just to give you a small example, if let's say there's a government election that happened in 2004, and the anticipation of election probably has begun somewhere in mid 2003, 2004ish, right? So you're going to have some kind of an effect on the managerial compensation decisions, the prospective managerial compensation decisions that are going to be carried forward for next 1 or 2 years. I'm pretty sure the placements in many of these schools and all that stuff will also hit. Because the industry was not able to anticipate what kind of government was going to come in the future.
Sure.
So the same thing happened with the 2014 election as well, right?
Yeah. So that's why what we do, we use this alpha JT, which is industry fixed effects by year trends. interacted. So every industry's anticipation of the time, how the time events will change, would be absorbed by this industry fixed effects with time trends. That's how we argue. But I take your point for sure. Absolutely. We need to think more about on this.
So if you had something like a GDP and the GDP deflator, just for the sake of argument, as one of your control variables.
No, we actually, so all the control variables are deflated by GDP at 2000, GDP deflator. So these ones, x, t minus 1, these are all deflated.
No, that I think I'm pretty sure you would do that. All I'm saying that if you had GDP itself, or a growth rate of GDP itself, because that will capture some kind of future expectations.
True. Sure. Definitely. We'll keep that. Definitely. Thanks. Sure. So our main variable of interest is beta 1, which is the interaction of IPR02 and high tech. Is basically a different diff that we are doing. In simple terms, that beta 1 is actually highlighting the within firm differences between the high techs and the low techs, and this is actually the direct effect of the IPR on the so what beta 1 does is measures the effect of the 2002 IPR reform on the firm level share of managerial compensation, given that a firm invests more in technological upgrading before the reform, and therefore it measures the relative effect of the 2002 IPR reform, the demand for managers of the high tech firms, and also presents a different approach to measure the effect of the IPR reform, and the interaction term would capture the differential effect. Or in other words, what we expect is the share of managerial compensation of the high-tech firms to rise. Therefore, there is a change in the managerial compensation due to the IPR reform, net of general change post 2002, and net of permanent differences across low-tech firms. So because it's a different diff, so all these permanent differences are going to cancel out. So this is the benchmark. I'm not very sure, I shouldn't have pasted it. So this is what we do. We start with the total number of managers, the extensive margin of a firm, and you can see this interaction term is significantly positive, that the difference in the high techs and the low techs are increasing after the reform, because of a firm is investing more before the end of the reform in complementarity with the IPR change. What we do next, we use the managerial compensation, just absolute managerial compensation divided by GVA, and the result is the same. Next, what we do, we use the managerial the relative share of the managerial compensation, and we see it's also the same, that the complementarity effect of the IPR change in terms of the technological adoption is significantly differs across high techs and the low tech firms. And we do, in fact, we interact industry fixed effects at the 4th digit with year fixed effects, and the results are absolutely the same. In the last one, what we do, use an average treatment effect, because what we define is like a pseudo treatment in the control group, and sometimes it biases the results. An average treatment effect would obviously pick up, then you can see the results does not differ, it's absolutely the same. Lastly, what we do, you use the average managerial compensation, that how the demand for the managers actually changes, and it's the same, that the average managerial compensation is also changing.
One small question. Do you also notice that the so-called high-tech firms are also producing greater amount of intellectual property? Do you notice that in the data? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Intellectual property by what?
So the high-tech firms post 2002
is filing more patents?
Yeah.
So we have now actually matched the data to do the patent filings. We haven't done it, but I have the data set right now matched to do the next step, to do the patent filings. And it's
so because what you're saying is theoretically possible if the intellectual property is also going up.
Going up. So what we are seeing here, we are just talking about the input side, that the production technology, or so let's just go to the next slide. So there are two effects here. One is a direct effect. So let's say innovation, incentives to innovation increases, you employ R&D managers. That's the direct effect. So there could be two effects. The other one is an indirect effect, which we are talking right now in the input side, that the tech you have. So let's go to this tag. So you can see this is R&D expenditure between high tech and low firms is the same. This is the direct effect. that the high-tech firms are increasing R&D with respect to the low-tech firms, they are R&D managers. Okay, now let's go to the technology transfer, and you can see the same effect. So this is foreign acquisition of technology, adoption of technology. And you can see it was dropping actually until 2002, and it significantly rises, bump 2002, it's the same. It just drops post 2002, and the same happens for import of capital goods. It was dropping and it booms in 2002, and it's the same. It was dropping, and it rises a bit. So what we are talking about, this is basically change in the production technology. So this is indirect effect. What happens, when there is a change in the production technology, the firms had this new set of inputs that coming into the production technology to produce new kinds of outputs. And for this, the firms need much more people who have this specialized knowledge to use these inputs into the production technology. And all these inputs, so this is a table to understand the possible mechanism. So this is what I did was, so this is India's trading partner in terms of imported capital. So you can see 82% of the imported capital came from OECD countries. And the imported capital goods are of very high quality and R&D intensive when they come from these OECD countries. And this opened up a new set of problems within the firm in terms of production technology. Okay, and this may have demanded more managers because the high techs were doing much more than the low techs, this one, given the previous diagram. And this created the inequality between firms in post-2002 period. Yes, we do not, you may be right in thinking that we do not have the data right now to show that the managers are actually doing complex works. I guess no data set exists like that. They can actually show that the managers. What we are trying to show is the indirect evidence that there is this happening, and this is the conjunction effect of the IPR change. The technological adoption is happening because of the IPR change, and the managerial compensation is increasing. So the complementarity effect follows this way.
So what you are essentially saying, if I understand it, is that with better IPR comes better production technology. That's, I think, the conclusion of the paper. Right?
Yes.
So far at least.
Yes, absolutely. So we are talking absolutely about the input side. So we are now, patent filings have the data, we'll include, then we are talking about the output side. And if the output or input matches, everything is fine. That they are doing more intellectual property because of the managers, we are good. So it's just what we are saying now, the production technology changes. Firms are using much better technologies post-IPR period. The difference between the production technologies between the low techs and the high techs actually increases. There's a paper by Aguillon in 2005 in competition and inverted hypothesis. So what he argues is competition is actually increases the inequality of innovation between technological leaders and technological ladders. It's supposed to decrease, but it actually increases because the technological leaders, which are a priori, the competition can invest much more when the innovation rates go down after the competition. I guess we are showing in kind of a monopoly setup because patents is giving you some monopoly rights over your product. So in kind of a monopolistic competition or monopoly setup, it happens the same. That the difference between the firms, technological leaders or technological laggards, increases. We divide between middle managers, top managers, results are the same, both increases. What we do next, we divide it between wages and incentives. Just see this column. So for all managers, we do not find any effect, actually, do not find. And just focus on this column, that the entire effect actually comes from the incentives. That gives you an idea that firms are actually opening up encountering new set of problems that the managers can only do. The entire compensation effect is actually done by the incentives contracts, and you can see the middle managers are mostly driving this. So what happens when there's a problem in the production technology, the production workers cannot solve these problems, and they go to this middle management level to ask for these problems to solve it. It's a moral hazard problem, and for that the middle managers are increasing. Because they are the next to encounter the problem after the production workers.
So how are these incentives?
So these are 4 categories like bonuses, commissions, contribution to provident fund, and there's one more. It's these bonuses commissions. We do a counterfactual in terms of non-managerial compensation. You see the non-managerial compensation increases, the total number of non-managers also increases, but what you see, obviously share will drop because the other was increasing, but you can see the average non-managerial wage and average non-managerial compensation is not getting affected. So the demand is not getting affected for the non-managers. It's only for the managers that is getting affected. We test for different other channels. So this is the trade channel, input tariffs and output tariffs interacted with high techs, nothing changes. We use input competition effect in terms of input competition from China, nothing changes. We use the export market competition in terms of competition in the US, nothing changes. What we do, use skill intensity at the industry level with high techs, nothing changes. What affects is basically what we have, you cannot see this management technology. So this is also affecting, this is one variable that is also, so what is management technology? So Bloom and Van Drienen has a survey of, again a survey of, for 1 year, understand how management quality is across India's industries. So use this management quality data, interacted with high-tech firms, and the initial effect does not go away, but it's still significant. So management quality, you can see, still affects the managerial compensation. So there is a governance kind of idea that also affects managerial compensation in the long run. Obviously, when we interact TFP with high-tech firms, that also being positive. So the productive firms are giving higher compensation to the managerial products. That is absolutely intuitive. We do a robustness check. So what we do, we reduce the period in 2005, because in 2005 India actually ended the TRIPS compliant period. So we just reduced till 2005, and the results still the same. We aggregate everything at the industry level. We use this 1999 patent bill again, and you can see there is no effect of the 1999 patent bill. People may argue that actually people were anticipating 2002 happen because 1999 happened, and things may have adjusted in between, and you can see nothing has changed for the 1999 reform. It's almost entirely everything is in the 2002. We use only pharma. The pharma does not drive the results. We drop the firms which are greater than the 98th percentile because these could be big firms. The results again same. We use fractional logic because there will be a lot of zeros on the left hand side. The results again same. We use a PPML, Poisson likelihood estimator. The results are the same. Now, so what we are talking about is so what we argue is the perception effect in the endogeneity of the reforms. So what we do in this, we take till IPR T minus 4 a value 1 in the year 1 in 1998. In 1999, 1999 and in 2000, and again accumulative effect after 2001. You can see there is no effect, perception effect, before the reform happened. This would have picked it up, and entire effect is actually, it's increasing. So this is T plus 1, and you can see in 2 plus 2 is increasing. So the year after the effect is actually increasing. So it's an accumulation effect that is happening after the IPR.
So
yes,
another small check you could do. Number of firms that have moved to pre-1990, above pre-1990 median, or median that you defined in 1990.
Okay, that you are defining.
So you are prior defining a median, and you're saying that these are high tech and these are low tech.
So you want me to define it between 1990 and 1999 and see.
Right. So and then post IPR, is there any movement in the firms itself?
Exactly.
Previously called low tech to go to high tech.
Absolutely.
Corresponding
So that nice. I should see that. And this will also then take care of people cannot argue that something has happened between 1999 and 2002.
Right. I mean, so
the perception effect goes away there.
Yes, in 1990, I know a few bucket manufacturers who are low tech and who are high tech. But 2002,
everything become same. Again, it's just simple firm industry characteristics. It mostly for the exporters. It happened for both domestic and the foreign, but higher for the foreign, and it happened both for the intermediate and the final goods. Industry. Next, this is what we talk about the design. So there is a change in the demand for managers, but now what we want to understand in how does it change the design of a firm. So as a firm expanded vertically or as a firm expanded horizontally. The span of control of a firm has increased, so the firm has expanded vertically. And to understand the span of control of the hierarchy is basically to have the best thing to have is the divisions within a firm. And Prowess does not report divisions within a firm. So what we do, we read the literature and see that the literature argue that the introduction of the new varieties by a firm is the closest proxy to understand the divisions of a firm. So when firm is introduced a new variety, firms open up a new division. So that's that's the closest proxy to have. And in terms of the depth of the hierarchy or vertical expansion, so now because we know the number of managers, we can actually calculate the number of layers and how layers are changing over time. So what we see is, you can see it both, so the IPR and high tech actually affects both the horizontal expansion and the vertical expansion. So what happens, the firm is growing like a tree. So divisions are added, directors are added. But in the columns 5 and 6, what we do is we do a simple correlation understanding of is the layers or the product scope is driving managerial compensation, how this is associated. And you can see these layers, we interact this with the layers and product scope. The entire effect is on the product scope. So the span of control, the firms are become flattening over time, flatter. So the idea is that the firm produces a new product innovation happens, firm files a new product and the division is opened. When a division is opened, I guess then a manager comes in to supervise this division. So the basic managerial compensation is driven by the change in the horizontal dimension of a firm and not the vertical dimension of a firm. We use this case for India to understand how the changes in intellectual property regimes on the demand for managers, and we find significant evidence on managerial compensation due to increase in incentives to innovate, especially for the high-tech firms, and change in the innovation policy led to a 16%, around 16% relative managerial compensation in the firm. We see mostly both within and between firm inequality. Most of the inequality basically is coming from between firm and not the within firm. The pattern is acute for both exporting and non-exporting firms, both domestic and foreign, final intermediate goods, and it leads to the increase in both vertical and horizontal dimension of a firm, but it indicates towards flattening of the firms more than the horizontal dimension. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.